The plasma bolt seared past Dr. Elena Vasquez's shoulder as she pressed deeper into the maintenance tunnel, her medical bag clutched against her chest. Overhead, the space station's emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. The rebellion had struck without warning, cutting through Nexus Station's defenses like a knife through silk. "This way," a voice called from behind her. Elena turned to see a young woman in a torn maintenance uniform, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. The woman's eyes held a strange calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "You're hurt," Elena said, pulling the stranger into an alcove as another explosion shook the station. "Let me look at that. There's no time. They're hunting anyone with medical training." "The rebels need hostages." The woman winced as Elena cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency. "I'm Aria. I work in the lower decks." Elena's hands moved automatically, applying a biopatch to stop the bleeding. Something about Aria's posture, the way she held herself even while injured, felt familiar, but there was no time to place the memory. "Dr. Vasquez to any security forces," Elena whispered into her comm. Static answered. "Comms are down," Aria confirmed. "The rebels hit the communication array first." The sound of boots echoed through the corridor outside their hiding spot. Elena's breath caught as shadows moved past the alcove opening. 3 figures in dark armor, weapons raised, scanning for movement. "The medical bay is this way," one rebel called to the others. "High-value targets will head there to help the wounded." Elena's pulse quickened. Her small clinic on level 7 had become a trap. Anyone seeking medical aid would walk directly into rebel hands. She thought of Dr. Payard, Martinez, the young resident who'd been working late, and Mrs. Chen from the diplomatic quarter who'd been scheduled for surgery. "We have to warn them," Elena whispered. Aria's hand closed over hers. "The maintenance shafts. I know every inch of this station's lower levels. We can reach the medical bay through the service tunnels." Something in Aria's voice carried absolute certainty. Elena had heard that tone before in battlefield commanders and senior diplomats. It didn't match a maintenance worker's background, but survival trumped curiosity. They crawled through narrow passages that reeked of recycled air and lubricants. Aria moved with surprising grace, for someone injured, navigating turns and junctions without hesitation. Behind them, the sounds of fighting grew more distant, but Elena knew the rebels would systematically search every level. "Stop," Aria whispered, pressing her ear to a ventilation grate. Through the slats, Elena could see into the medical bay's main corridor. Dr. Martinez stood at the reception desk, completely unaware of the danger approaching. 3 rebels, coming from the north corridor, Aria breathed, armed with stun weapons. "They want prisoners alive." Elena's hands shook as she watched the young doctor check patient files, oblivious to death approaching around the corner. She'd trained Martinez herself, watched him grow from a nervous student into a competent physician. The thought of him in rebel hands made her stomach twist. "The emergency lockdown," Elena whispered. "Every medical facility has one. If we can trigger it from the inside, it'll seal the bay and send an automatic distress signal to Earth Command." Aria nodded toward a service panel 20 meters down the corridor. "The manual override is there, but someone would have to reach it while staying hidden from the rebels." Elena studied the layout. The panel sat in clear view of the approaching corridor. Whoever went for it would be completely exposed. "I'll go," Elena said. "You're hurt, and I know the medical protocols better." "No." Aria's voice carried sudden authority. "I'm faster, and if they catch me, they'll think I'm just a maintenance worker. If they catch you, they have their primary target." Before Elena could protest, Aria was moving. She slipped through the grate with fluid precision, dropped silently to the floor, and rolled behind a medical cart. Elena watched, her heart hammering, as the young woman calculated angles and distances like a tactical specialist. The rebels rounded the corner just as Aria reached the service panel. Elena pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle her gasp as weapons swung toward Aria's position. But Aria's fingers were already dancing over the controls. Emergency barriers slammed down across every entrance to the medical bay. The rebels fired, but their shots sparked harmlessly off reinforced steel. Dr. Martinez spun around, finally realizing his danger as the lockdown alarm began its piercing wail. Through the sealed barriers, Elena could hear the rebels shouting orders, trying to override the security systems. But Aria had triggered something deeper than a simple lockdown. Emergency protocols were cascading through the station's network, alerting Earth Command and sealing critical infrastructure. "How did you know the override codes?" Elena whispered as Aria climbed back into the ventilation system, her face pale from the effort. Aria's eyes met hers for a long moment. Then she smiled, and something shifted in her expression. The careful mask of a maintenance worker fell away, revealing something else entirely. "Because I designed them," Aria said quietly. "Doctor." Elena Vasquez felt the world tilt beneath her as she looked into eyes she'd seen broadcast across every newsfeed in the colonized systems. Eyes that belonged to Queen Aria Blackwood of the Human Colonial Alliance, the most powerful woman in known space. "Your Majesty," Elena breathed, then caught herself. "But why are you here? Why are you dressed as a maintenance worker?" Aria, Queen Blackwood, pulled herself deeper into the shaft as explosions echoed from the sealed medical bay. "Because I needed to see Nexus Station without the crown, to understand how our people really live." Elena's mind reeled. The Human Colonial Alliance spanned 47 star systems, with Queen Blackwood as its absolute ruler. She commanded fleets that could glass planets and wielded political power that made empires tremble. Yet here she sat in a ventilation shaft, bleeding and exhausted like any other refugee. "The rebels," Elena managed. "Do they know? My security detail is 3 levels down, fighting their way up through heavy resistance. The rebels planned this perfectly. Isolate me during my inspection tour, kill my guards, then use my capture to force the Alliance's surrender." The Queen's voice carried no fear, only cold calculation. Elena had heard that tone in her battlefield hospital days, when commanders made decisions that would cost thousands of lives but save millions more. "My head of security, Commander Torres, will activate Protocol 7 if I don't check in within the next hour," the Queen continued. "That means orbital bombardment of this station to prevent my capture." Elena's blood turned to ice. Protocol 7 would vaporize everything within 50 kilometers, including the 3,000 civilians taking shelter in Nexus Station's lower levels. "You can't let that happen," Elena whispered. "I won't have a choice. The Alliance cannot survive if I'm used as leverage against our colonies. Sometimes a ruler must sacrifice herself to protect her people." The Queen's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "But first we need to get you to safety." "Me?" Elena stared at her in confusion. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, field trauma surgeon, decorated veteran of the Titan War. Do you think I don't know who you are?" The Queen's smile held genuine warmth despite their desperate situation. "You saved 200 Marines during the Battle of Europa Station. The Alliance owes you a considerable debt." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was just doing my job. Just like you did tonight when you treated my injuries without knowing who I was. When you risked your life to save Dr. Martinez and the others." Queen Blackwood's eyes softened. "True service has nothing to do with crowns or recognition, Dr. Vasquez. It comes from within." An explosion much closer than the others shook the ventilation shaft. Dust rained down from the metal seams as emergency lighting flickered overhead. Through the grate below, Elena could see rebel forces working frantically to cut through the medical bay's emergency barriers. "They're using industrial plasma cutters," the Queen observed. "Those barriers will hold for maybe 20 minutes. Elena checked her chronometer. 43 minutes until Protocol 7 activated. If they could hold out until then, the rebels would be vaporized along with everything else on the station. "There has to be another way," Ainless said. "Some way to contact your security detail, call off the orbital strike." The rebels destroyed the main communication array. "Short-range comms only work within the same section, and we're cut off from my guards by 3 levels of heavy fighting." The Queen studied the shaft layout around them, but there is the emergency broadcast system. Elena felt a spark of hope. The civilian emergency system, that has its own dedicated transmitter, hidden in the station's core, behind multiple security layers. If we could reach it, I could contact Commander Torres directly. The Queen paused, but it would mean crossing through rebel-controlled territory, and they'll be watching every major route. "What about the maintenance network? You said you know these lower levels better than anyone. The Queen's expression grew thoughtful. There's a service tunnel that runs directly beneath the core chamber. It's narrow, poorly ventilated, and hasn't been used for routine maintenance in years. But it might work. Elena nodded toward the Queen's bandaged head. Can you make the journey with that injury? I've survived worse. The question is whether you're willing to risk your life for a plan that probably won't work. The Queen's voice carried no pressure, only honest assessment. If we're caught, the rebels will have both a high-value hostage and the Alliance's most skilled trauma surgeon. That combination could extend this war for years. Elena thought of Dr. Martinez, trapped in the medical bay below, of Mrs. Chen and the other patients, depending on medical care that wouldn't come if rebels took the station, of the 3,000 civilians who would die if Protocol 7 activated. I've never walked away from a patient who needed help, Elena said. I'm not starting now, the Queen smiled, and for a moment Elena saw not the ruler of 47 star systems, but the young woman who'd risked her life to save a stranger without expecting anything in return. Then we go together. If we make it, I'll owe you another debt. If we don't, at least we tried. They began moving deeper into the maintenance network, following passages that grew narrower and more cramped with each turn. The Queen's knowledge of the station's layout proved flawless, but Elena could see exhaustion setting in. Blood had soaked through the biopatch, and the Queen's breathing had become labored. 27 minutes until Protocol 7. Elena pushed forward, following the most powerful woman in human space through darkness, toward a desperate chance at salvation. The service tunnel beneath the core chamber stretched like a metal throat into blackness. Elena's headlamp cut through dusty air thick with the smell of oxidized metal and stagnant moisture. Beside her, Queen Blackwood moved with determined precision despite the blood still seeping from her bandaged head. Motion sensors, the Queen whispered, pointing to barely visible devices mounted on the tunnel walls, but they're tied to the main security grid. The rebels shut that down when they took the command center. Elena felt a moment of relief, then noticed something else. Those aren't just motion sensors. Look at the placement. The Queen followed Elena's gaze and her expression darkened. Defense turrets, hidden in the ceiling panels. If someone manually reactivated them, a soft mechanical hum answered her concern. Red targeting lasers swept through the tunnel ahead, crisscrossing in a deadly web of light. Someone had indeed reactivated the automated defenses. Dr. Elena Vasquez and an unidentified companion. A voice echoed from hidden speakers. Please identify yourself and state your business in restricted areas. Elena recognized the voice. Commander Torres, the Queen's head of security. But protocol demanded he challenge any movement near the core chamber, even if he suspected the Queen's presence. Commander, it's me, Queen Blackwood called softly. Authorization code Nightingale 77 Alpha. Silence stretched for long seconds. Then the targeting lasers vanished, and hidden panels slid open in the tunnel walls. Commander Torres emerged, his armor battered and his face grim with exhaustion. Your Majesty. He dropped to one knee, then quickly rose and scanned the tunnel behind them. Status report indicates rebel forces are systematically searching for you. 3 of my men didn't make it out of the initial assault. Elena watched the Queen's expression harden at news of casualties among her guard. How long until Protocol 7, Commander? 18 minutes. I've tried everything to reach the orbital fleet, but the rebels have jammed all communications except short-range tactical frequencies. Torres looked troubled. Ma'am, we need to evacuate you immediately. My ship is docked at Bay 7, but we'll have to fight through heavy resistance. Negative, Commander. Dr. Vasquez has a plan to access the emergency broadcast system. If we can reach the core chamber, we can call off the orbital strike and save the station. Torres glanced at Elena with professional assessment. Dr. Vasquez, your reputation precedes you, but the core chamber is crawling with rebels. They know it's strategically important, even if they don't understand why. Elena studied the tunnel layout on Torres's tactical display. The core chamber sat 30 meters above them, accessible through a maintenance shaft that opened directly into the broadcast control room. But thermal scans showed at least 6 rebel positions between their current location and the access point. What if we create a distraction? Elena suggested. Draw the rebels away from the chamber while someone else reaches the broadcast controls. I could lead my remaining men in a direct assault on their positions, Torres offered. But once we engage, you'd have maybe 5 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Too risky. Your men have already sacrificed enough. She turned to Elena. Is there a medical reason to evacuate civilians from the core area? Elena caught the Queen's intent immediately. Gas leak. If we trigger the emergency ventilation alarms, civilian safety protocols would require evacuating all non-essential personnel from the core chamber. Brilliant. Commander, can your men access the environmental controls? Torres nodded. The rebels disabled automated systems, but manual overrides are still functional. Give me 3 minutes. As Torres moved to contact his men, Elena noticed the Queen swaying slightly. The head injury was worse than she'd admitted, and the stress of their escape was taking its toll. Your Majesty, you need medical attention. Let me check that wound again. No time, Doctor. We're down to 15 minutes. But the Queen accepted Elena's steadying hand as they prepared to move. Torres reported back through his comm. Environmental alarms activated. Rebels are pulling back from the core chamber to investigate the gas leak warning. You've got a clear window, but it won't last long. They climbed through the maintenance shaft in single file, Elena leading because her medical training included emergency response procedures. The core chamber's broadcast controls were exactly where the station schematics indicated, but Elena's heart sank as she examined the communication array. The rebels didn't just jam the signal, she told the Queen. They physically damaged the primary transmitter. The backup system has only enough power for one short transmission. How short? Queen Blackwood was already moving toward the controls, her fingers dancing over interface panels with practiced efficiency. Maybe 30 seconds. Enough to transmit coordinates and a basic message, but not detailed orders. The Queen paused, her hands hovering over the communication controls. Through the chamber's viewports, Elena could see rebel forces already returning from their false alarm. In 12 minutes, orbital bombardment would reduce everything to plasma and debris. Commander Torres, I need you to escort Dr. Vasquez to your ship immediately, the Queen ordered through her comm. Ma'am? Torres's confusion was evident. That's a direct order, Commander. Get the doctor off this station. Elena realized what the Queen intended. You're going to stay behind. Transmit the coordinates and call off the strike, but sacrifice yourself to save everyone else. It's the only way. The message has to come from my personal command codes, authenticated by biometric scan. If I leave with you, the rebels will detect our escape, and they'll hunt down my ship before we can get clear of the blast radius. The Queen's voice carried finality. But you don't have to die for my mistakes, Doctor. Your mistakes. Elena stared at her. You came here to understand how your people live. You risked everything to help strangers who didn't even know your name. Those aren't mistakes. I underestimated the threat. My security briefings indicated minimal rebel activity in this sector. 3 good men died because of my poor judgment. Queen Blackwood's hands moved steadily over the controls despite the tremor in her voice. Elena watched this woman who commanded fleets and ruled star systems blame herself for an intelligence failure that could have happened to anyone. Leadership at that level meant accepting responsibility for outcomes beyond any single person's control. Your Majesty, Elena said quietly, what if we split the transmission? The Queen looked up from the controls. Split it how? 30 seconds is enough for 2 15-second messages. You transmit your command codes and authentication first. Then I send the tactical coordinates from my position here, while you evacuate with Torres. That won't work. The biometric scanner requires continuous presence for... The Queen stopped, understanding dawning in her eyes. Unless someone manually overrides the security protocols. Elena nodded toward the manual override panel. I stay behind to complete the transmission. You get off the station alive. Dr. Vasquez, I cannot ask you to. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Elena checked the chronometer. 8 minutes until Protocol 7. Besides, someone needs to make sure those rebels don't interfere with the signal. Through the chamber windows, Elena could see armed figures moving back toward the core area. Time was running out for both of them. Queen Blackwood looked at Elena for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Computer, begin recording personal message." She took a breath and spoke directly into the communication array. "Commander Torres, this is Queen Blackwood. Priority 1 authentication follows." The biometric scanner hummed as it confirmed her identity through retinal scan, voice print, and genetic markers. Elena watched the upload progress increase with agonizing slowness. "Authentication complete," the computer announced. 15 seconds of transmission time remaining. "Go," Elena said, her hands already moving toward the manual override controls. "I'll send coordinates as soon as you're clear." The Queen hesitated at the chamber's exit. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, by the authority invested in me as Queen of the Human Colonial Alliance, I hereby grant you the Star of Valor for extraordinary service above and beyond duty." Then she was gone, following Torres through the maintenance shaft as rebel voices echoed from the corridors. Elena locked the chamber door and turned back to the communication controls. 6 minutes until orbital bombardment. 6 minutes to save 3,000 lives. Elena's hands moved over the manual override panel as explosions echoed through the core chamber's outer hall. The rebels had found their location and begun cutting through the reinforced doors that separated her from capture. She could hear plasma torches working against metal, see the faint glow of superheated alloy beginning to weaken. "Computer, status of evacuation ship." Elena spoke into the communication array while monitoring the door's integrity. "Royal Security Vessel departing Bay 7, estimated clear of blast radius in 4 minutes. Elena felt a surge of relief. Queen Blackwood would survive, along with Commander Torres and the surviving members of her security detail. Now Elena just had to complete the transmission before rebels broke through her defenses. 3 minutes until Protocol 7 activation. The manual override controls responded to her input, bypassing security protocols that would have required the Queen's continued presence. Elena's medical training included emergency communication procedures, but she'd never used them to prevent orbital bombardment. "Warning, hull breach imminent," the computer announced, as the door began glowing cherry red under the rebels' assault. Elena typed coordinates for the station's civilian shelter areas into the communication array. The orbital fleet needed exact locations to avoid when they called off the strike. One mistake in the targeting data could still kill thousands of innocent people. Transmission ready, awaiting final authorization. 2 minutes until Protocol 7. The chamber door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal and plasma fire. 3 rebels in combat armor rushed through the breach, weapons raised and targeting Elena's position. She dove behind the communication console as energy bolts sparked off the broadcast equipment. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," the lead rebel called out. "Step away from the controls and you will not be harmed." Elena kept her head down as sparks rained from damaged circuits above her. The communication array was still functional, but one more direct hit would destroy their only link to the orbital fleet. "I'm just trying to help wounded civilians," Elena called back, hoping to play for time. "We know exactly what you're trying to do, Doctor. Your queen has abandoned you here to die, while she escapes to safety. Is that loyalty worth your life?" Elena thought of Queen Blackwood treating her own injuries in the ventilation shaft, risking capture to warn Dr. Martinez, fighting through exhaustion to save people she'd never met. True leadership meant serving others even when they couldn't serve you back. "Computer, transmit message." The communication array hummed to life, broadcasting coordinates and the Queen's authentication codes toward the orbital fleet 60,000 kilometers above. Elena could hear the rebels shouting, could feel plasma bolts heating the air around her position. 1 minute until Protocol 7. "Message transmitted," the computer announced, awaiting response from Orbital Command. Elena held her breath as seconds stretched toward eternity. The rebels had stopped firing, perhaps realizing that their window for escape was closing rapidly. Through the chamber's damaged viewport, she could see escape pods launching from the station as word spread that the orbital strike might be canceled. "Incoming transmission from Orbital Command," the computer announced. Commander Torres's voice filled the chamber. "Dr. Vasquez, this is Orbital Fleet Command. We have received authentication and coordinates. Protocol 7 is canceled." "Repeat. Protocol 7 is canceled." All civilians remain in shelter until we neutralize remaining rebel forces. Elena sank back against the communication console, her legs suddenly weak with relief. Around her, the rebels were surrendering their weapons as they realized their mission had failed. Queen Blackwood was safe, the station was safe, and 3,000 innocent people would see another day. The chamber's emergency lighting flickered back to normal as station power grids came online. Through her comm unit, Elena could hear medical teams organizing response efforts and security forces coordinating with Torres's orbital units. Dr. Vasquez? A familiar voice came through the chamber's damaged door. Elena looked up to see Queen Blackwood stepping carefully through the debris, followed by Torres and a full squad of Royal Marines. The Queen's head wound had been properly bandaged, and she moved with renewed strength. "Your Majesty," Elena began, struggling to stand. "You should have stayed clear until..." "Until what? Until I left behind the woman who saved my life and the lives of everyone on this station?" Queen Blackwood moved toward Elena with purposeful steps. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, your actions today demonstrate the highest values of human courage and sacrifice." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was just doing what needed to be done, just as you've always done. During the Titan War, as a civilian physician on Nexus Station, and now as someone who risked everything for people you barely knew." The Queen's voice carried across the chamber, formal and clear. "Kneel, Dr. Vasquez." Elena knelt, confused but trusting, as Queen Blackwood drew an ornate ceremonial blade from Commander Torres's equipment pack. The Marines around them came to attention, their armor gleaming under the chamber's restored lighting. "Elena Vasquez," the Queen began, her voice ringing with royal authority. "For extraordinary valor in the face of overwhelming danger, for selfless service to the Crown and the people of the Human Colonial Alliance, and for exemplifying the finest traditions of human excellence, I hereby elevate you to the Order of the Golden Star." The blade touched Elena's shoulders lightly as the Queen continued the ancient ceremony. "Rise, Dame Elena Vasquez, Knight of the Realm, protector of the innocent, healer of the wounded. Your service will be remembered as long as humans reach for the stars." Elena stood slowly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Only 50 people in the Alliance's history had received the Order of the Golden Star, and most of them posthumously. "Your Majesty, I don't deserve..." "Dr. Vasquez," Queen Blackwood interrupted gently. "When I was bleeding in that ventilation shaft, you didn't see a queen or a commoner. You saw someone who needed help, and you provided it without question or expectation of reward. That is the truest form of nobility." Elena looked around the chamber at the Marines standing at attention, at Commander Torres nodding with respect, at the Queen who ruled 47 star systems but had risked everything to save strangers. "Your Majesty," Elena said quietly, "what happens now?" Queen Blackwood smiled, and Elena saw again the woman who had crawled through maintenance shafts and fought alongside her against impossible odds. "Now we rebuild. We learn from today's events and ensure they never happen again. And we remember that true strength comes not from power or position, but from ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things when others need them most." The Queen paused, her expression growing serious. "Dame Elena, I have a proposition for you. The Alliance needs a new Surgeon General, someone who understands both the medical needs of our colonies and the reality of life beyond the royal court. Are you interested?" Elena felt her world tilt again. Surgeon General meant overseeing medical care for nearly 2 billion people across 47 star systems. It meant resources beyond her imagination, the power to implement changes she'd only dreamed of. It also meant leaving her small clinic on Nexus Station, where she'd helped miners with broken bones and diplomats with stress headaches, treating everyone with equal care regardless of their station in life. "Your Majesty, I am honored by the offer, but I need to ask, would I still be able to practice medicine directly? To treat patients myself, not just manage other doctors?" Queen Blackwood's smile widened. "Dame Elena, I wouldn't dream of taking you away from patient care. The Alliance needs leaders who remember what it means to serve on the front lines." Elena looked around the damaged chamber one more time, thinking of Dr. Martinez, working late in the medical bay, of Mrs. Chen recovering from surgery, of all the people who depended on medical professionals to be there when disaster struck. Then I accept, Your Majesty, on one condition. The Queen raised an eyebrow. A condition? The Alliance guarantees emergency medical care to every person in every system, regardless of their ability to pay or their political status. Free medical training for anyone willing to serve in underrepresented areas, and mandatory trauma response training for all government personnel. Done. Queen Blackwood extended her hand. Welcome to Royal Service, Dame Elena. I have a feeling we're going to accomplish great things together. As Elena shook the Queen's hand, she realized that sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as ordinary emergencies. She'd started the night as a simple station doctor treating an injured maintenance worker. Now she was a knight of the realm, preparing to reshape medical care across human space. But the most important thing hadn't changed at all. Tomorrow, somewhere in the galaxy, someone would be hurt, frightened, and in need of help. And Elena would be there, just as she'd always been, ready to serve anyone who needed healing. The stars were calling, and Dame Elena Vasquez was ready to answer.